Hey, what's up? I think we're live. I think we're live now, so thank you so much for joining me. Um, Decided to start, maybe try and start a little earlier. Uh, 2 minutes in advance to be precise, which is better, I guess, than a couple of minutes late. Now, here's the thing I made a miscalculation and I started uploading a YouTube video. So the already not so good internet connection may give us some challenges today. So if I'm broken off a bit, if you don't see me well, or if there are any issues like that, my apologies in advance. It's not going to be that heavy on the painting side today, honestly, even though I know I said it's mixing greens. The idea today isn't going to be necessarily it's not going to be a complete process. It's going to be just us doing it for fun and seeing what kind of results we can achieve. Now, for some reason, I don't see the chat updating on my end, so what I'll do is open up the video and now I can see your messages. That sometimes happens. YouTube can be a little funky. So again, sorry if the video is not the smoothest playthrough. Yeah, I know there's a delay. That makes sense. So let's see here. Let's give it a few seconds. Let's see if it can stabilize. I cannot stop the video upload, so you'll have to forgive me. And that's taking its toll on the system. Maybe I can pause it. I don't know. I don't think I can. So sorry about that. So we have Limbert Pereira Villacorta says hi. We have Dave says hi Liron. Good to see you, my friend, as well as everyone else. Hope everyone is okay. Kelvin says, I just mix yellow ochre and ultramarine for my foliage green. Simple and no need to think. Yeah, I do kind of the same most of the time. Let me know if the sound at the very least is okay, and I will apologize in advance if it's slow. Uploading videos is usually a thing that greatly slows the connection. So, yeah, as long as the audio is okay for now, we should be good. There's something every time. The last live stream that was a complete nightmare. There was a different issue. There was a lot of people just using the internet connection. So that can happen. Now, how should I... Okay, so I'm going to try and do something. I'm going to try and refresh the page where I see the stream, and hopefully it won't stop it. Because I want to see your comments here, and I can't see them there for some reason. So give me a second. We'll see. I think it should be good. Yeah, now I see your comments. Okay, good. So I'll follow and see if they continue updating. Thank you so much, Kelvin, for letting me know the audio's okay. It's terrible. It is terrible. Okay, yeah, now I'm getting new comments. So let's get rid of the other window. And let's do this. So Jack Evelyn says hello live. Kelvin Zero says hello live. Nayan Patel, hello sir. Nayan here from India. Namaste, how are you? I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking. You're in portrait, says Dave. What do you mean in portrait? Like you can't see me normally? That's weird. Dayfan, Aoki, hey Liron and everyone else, much love and gratitude from... Sorry, I can't see the flag from here. You'll have to let me know what flag it is. I do remember your email and I remember you mentioned, but it's hard to always make the connection, so sorry about that. Jack says there is a delay. Yeah, sorry about that. Dave says, fixed. Oh, okay, that portrait was fixed. John, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Of course I am. Hi, Liron. Hope you're well. Thank you so much. Adam, hello from Czech Republic. David Green, glad to be with you today. David Green, you have a perfect name for today's live stream, I guess. So welcome aboard. This will give us... So today's live isn't going to be as long, probably about an hour. And we started on time, so that'll give us probably a few more minutes to go over the chat properly and see who's in. So definitely feel free to ask questions. I got my haircut finally. It was getting to be way too much. So now at least I have a face. I have a double chin if I really try. Even if I try just a little. Yeah. She spins, or is it She spins? I'm not sure. Good morning, Nancy G. Morning, we're mixing greens in my watercolor class this afternoon. Cool. So you'll have a full day of mixing greens. Jack says we can hear you fine, so thank you so much. Florentina says, hola Liron, hey, how are you? Vicky Hodroff sends a heart and a cross. So thank you for the first aid. Thank you, Kelvin. Video very lag, I know, yeah. Jade, how are you? Jade Moonchild came to give you a virtual hug and hi. Can't stay, but hope the best. Thank you so much. Thank you for just dropping in to say hello. David Olivares, sounds fine. Marigold Wood, good afternoon from Italy. Rupali Shankar, hey Liron, Rupali from Mumbai, India. Thank you for being here. Dave, yes, Singapore. Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure because it looked almost like a German flag because of the dark background of my YouTube interface. Christine, how are you? Christine Bourgeois, hello, Liron and all. Florentina says Madrid, Spain. Watercolor by Shilpi. Hey, how are you? Shilpi from India. Denise says good morning from Huntsville, Alabama. She spins because I spin yarn. Okay, I see. So I'll remember that. I'll try. Katharina Ruth, that's a cool name. Rooth. Good afternoon from Sweden. Antonio Varela says hola from Portugal, and Alessandro says hello, Liron. Hey, thank you so much for being here. So what we're gonna do basically is just paint greens. Here's my table. Here's the thing. There are 2 points I want to touch upon, and if that is the one thing you take from today's stream, then I'm happy. One of them is the issue of depth, which a lot of people tend to flatten the painting by either going into one extreme. Either everything is muted, which is more rare, to be honest, or they're using a very, very bright, very strong green for everything. And that's an illusion, and it's important to dispel that illusion. What happens is when you look at trees in the background, and I experienced this firsthand, you tend to look at a tree that's really far away and you think to yourself, this tree is super green. I know it because here's a tree that's closer and that's super green. So the tendency is to paint them the same, which isn't true. There's a lot of optical illusions, things I hope to get into in the upcoming course too, by the way. So it is a very challenging topic to address, and hopefully I'll be able to do it in kind of a successful way. And we'll just we'll just see what we can get out of different types of mixes. One more point I wanted to touch upon. Which one was it? Oh yeah. So basically in nature, that's the second important thing. Even if you just screen capture the video right now, and you start sampling the colors you see here on Photoshop. So for example, this color right here, the part of the shirt that's in the light, the part of the shirt that's in the shadow, my skin tone in the shadow, skin tone in the light. What you'll find is that it's very rare to have an actual saturated bright color. Usually the colors are very muted unless it's something artificial like my cap or my shirt that are orange, or this pencil that's a bit of a stronger red, even though it's not visible, or this sharpener, or this price tag that's in Israeli shekels, 13 shekels. That's like $4. So something like $3. That's a very artificial color. Okay, and that's because it's human made. Most things in nature aren't that. So if you look at trees, if you look at everything, they're usually very muted. The green is actually very gray, it's a very brown, it's muddy, it's even purple. The one thing that will give a hint of maybe a bright color is somewhere along the highlights. So you'll get a highlight that's a little bit of a yellow, bright yellow, right next to it maybe a bright green, but that's pretty much it. So it's really important to understand that concept. So I think, let me see what you're saying, and then we'll jump into some quick demos. So Catherine Ruth, we read that. AD Gags, hi Liron, from Philippines. Cool, thank you for being here. Luce V, isn't it amazing you have friends from all over the world? Yeah, definitely, I'm so grateful for that. David Olivares, can you talk about presentation of finished work? Mattes, UV glass versus UV spray with no glass. So yeah, I put all of my paintings behind glass. If it's sold or whatever, if it's in a gallery, it's behind the glass. I never do the glassless, but that's just because I couldn't get it to work properly so far. I couldn't find the right materials here. We're very bad on varnishes and fixatives. I just couldn't, especially for watercolor. It's such a niche here. For oil and acrylics, you may find something that's a little better. For watercolor, what I used gave it a weird sheen that I wanted to avoid. I didn't like that at all. So I never gone back to using it. UV glass, I don't do that. I think normal glass by pretty severe standards should do the trick, from what I know and from what other people have told me from their very experienced experience. UV glass is a nice kind of extra measure. Let's say if you're if you know you're going to place the painting outside, for example, in direct sunlight all the time, maybe it will be important, but for the most part, if it's indoors, even if it's hit by direct light, normal glass should do it. The fading it's gonna take a long time, and even then it will probably not fade to a degree that is too noticeable and to the point where it ruins the painting, unless you're using really bad paints. That's obviously the kind of different case. I have ginger, shredded ginger here, so I need to mix it to make sure that I'm able to drink it. This is the ACV, the fashionable ACV drink. So just some water, lemon, ginger, and yeah, mats. If it's something important, I'll send it to someone to frame, and then they put a mat. It's the best way. It's very professional. Sometimes, if it's a smaller piece, the border around it, the white border around the painting, which let me show you a painting that I'll do a painting process of. So, for example, this one. If you leave enough of a border, that's fine, and you can put a glass, as long as there's a wide enough of a gap, you can put a glass right around it and it will be great. I actually consulted with my frames guy in the past, and he was like, just don't do the Passepartout, it will be too much and you don't need it. One time I insisted in one particular work where it looked better to me, because he showed it to me. But in other works, it wasn't necessary. It made the framing a little cheaper. So I think the best advice I can give you, if you can find someone in your area who does it, that'll be really good, and then you can kind of consult with them. But I know a lot of people are handy and they want to do it themselves, so that's great. Make your own mats. You can do that. I don't know how, sorry, I can't help in that way, but I know a lot of people do, or you can buy them, I think, pre-made. But you really want that bevel. So for example, the mat is the frame, like the Passepartout, I guess, that's what you mean. So let's say this is the painting, so you want it to go beveled to the painting. You want it to be at an angle, like, hopefully it's clear. Like this is the mat all around and it's at an angle. That's really important, I find. It just doesn't look as good without it. But as for glass, not that important. Now, I ship my paintings without a glass, without a frame, because that's the easiest. The people who receive it can choose their own frame. Yes, it costs more, but I would charge that price anyway if I would sell it already framed. It's much more expensive to ship framed, and you have a pretty significant risk that it will break in shipping. So if you sell oils or acrylics, it's not going to break. It's a canvas. You can also roll it, or you can sell it on the canvas. It's not going to break. It's tearing that you may be more concerned about, and cardboard will fix that. But with a painting like that, it makes it heavier, makes it so much more expensive. So I ship them unframed anyway. But yeah, if you're wondering about galleries and so on, or just to put on in your own home, that's how I usually do it. So yeah, long answer, way too long. I need to learn how to answer faster. Nora says hello from Sweden. Alessandro, mixing greens is a nice object for me. Yeah, cool. We'll jump into it in just like 2 minutes. Mark says cool. I recently watched a mixing green video by another YouTuber, Richard Bennett. Hey, how are you? Good afternoon, Liron. Cool hat, bro. Thank you. Thank you. When I used to sell my paintings at the art fair here, I used to put this one all the time because the sun is crazy. Nora says I love mixing greens. Kelvin says you should see my first watercolor landscape, phthalo green. Garden trees everywhere. Yeah, exactly. You speak my language, Kelvin. Petio87. By the way, Kelvin, I don't know if you've probably been following the Pokemon art. I have a bunch of cool stuff I'll show soon. Petio87. I paint far off trees in blues. Yeah, exactly. Mark Donovan, your video connection is quite slow. Lots of streaming delay. Yes, sorry about that. It's just gonna be that way today. Let me see what's up with the video upload. At least I can tell you when the nightmare is gonna end. Yeah, it's gonna end in 40 minutes, which is near probably the end of this stream, so you'll forgive me. It won't leave us much time with with a normal connection. My apologies. I'll try doing something after the video upload ends so that at least we get something that's good looking. Sorry about that. I really need to pay attention to this. I'll make sure to not do that next time. Blue for distant trees makes sense. That's right, Dave. Sorry I have to go. We'll watch the replay. Thank you so much, Nora. This time I'm ready with a towel because it's super hot. Even with the air conditioning, it's crazy. Been hearing good things about Doorland Wax Medium as a sealant for watercolor. Interesting. I'll check it out. Doorland Wax Medium. I'll now do a Google search now. Okay. So I'll have it for later. Marigold says, Ron Ranson said, don't get too green or too strong too soon, but I find it easier said than done. Yeah, that's true. Monica NJ says, hey Liron. Mark Donovan, I thought the video was going to be about mixing greens. Yeah, it is going to be about mixing greens. We'll do that in just a second. Ramona Wickstrom, hello from Minnesota. Marigold Wood, I love Thaler Blue. Okay, yeah, that's a reply to Calvin. So let's get started. I just wanted to catch up with all of the chat messages, and let's do this. So I'd like to just start by, I don't know, I'll warm up by using a few colors here and seeing what kind of results we can produce. So I'm going to use my my newfound manganese blue hue that John sent me. This one's really good. The only part about it that's a little challenging is mixing dark values, and that's perfectly fine. I'm actually adding a bit of ultramarine to it, usually to get it to be a little darker. So let's see what this one looks like. It's a beautiful blue. I like that a lot. And let me also spray my colors here. So yeah, and we'll experiment with kind of cool and warm mixes, and we'll see what we can produce. Because different types of blues and yellows and and reds will produce very different greens. I'm bumping the camera all over. My bad. So yeah, so this is our blue. Now if we just put even a bit of yellow next to it, and by the way I cleaned my palette, hopefully you like that, we get this nice little green that is not too strong. It's pretty natural, I would say, and I like the way it looks. Now let's do the same with French Ultramarine. So I got my French Ultramarine here. Again, the advantage with French Ultramarine, it just gets a little darker. It's easier to mix, especially with reds. So if we get started here, and we get this lovely, lovely French Ultramarine, which is a lot warmer than the manganese. You can push it to be darker, you just have to dig through it a bit. It will also sometimes depend on the paper, which is funny. Let me show you. So if I grab just a bit of test paper here, I'll use the same mix. It can appear a little darker on different types of paper, but that will be probably as dark as you can get with a single glaze. But now let's add that yellow to it, and let's see what we get. So this will usually end up as a bit of a more muted green. Now the reason for that is very simple. Because the blue is a little warmer, has a little more red in it. Now it doesn't actually have red in it. It's because I did see some people comment on that kind of a thing in other videos, not of mine, other creators too. It doesn't actually have red in it, if I recall. I don't know exactly how the color theory works. I just paint, but it doesn't have physically red in it. But because it's warmer, the warmth changes the green to be more neutral, because it is as if there was a bit more red in it. Okay, now you'll get to see the beautiful sheen in the light, hopefully, if I can catch the angle. There we go. There we go. So yeah, now let's try pushing this to be a little bit darker. And actually, I'm going to grab a bit of a springier brush, my Escoda. I'm using a mix of my Tracy, Lebenzon, and Escoda brushes. So we'll do that. This is a bit of a darker version of that. We'll add a bit of yellow, and we get this nice little kind of muted green. Now let us try something a little different. That's what has been said here in the chat. I'm going to try mixing it with Verona Gold Ochre. Now this is a bit of a hard physically paint to take out of the tube, so that's going to be its own kind of a challenge, but I'll show you here a bit of a mix, and you'll see it's much more muted. Okay, I'm going to put some water here, and look at what happens here. This is really almost to the level of I would say burnt sienna together with French Ultramarine. It goes almost gray in a way. It is green, but it's very gray. And we can try something a bit different here. So we have this, I forgot the color here, but if I mix that with a bit of French Ultramarine, you'll actually see how gray it gets. But it's just a different kind of gray. This is kind of a gray purple, because this red is still kind of red. And with the Verona Gold Ochre by Daniel Smith, by the way, it will just get a bit more of a green gray, which we love. Green gray is very useful to us. Now, let's set aside the whole only blue and only yellow thing for a minute, because remember, you can add red. So we'll start by using manganese, and look at how strong and beautiful it is here. Okay, And to that manganese, by the way, that's cerulean, it's really hard to awaken, so I'm not using it for now. To that manganese, we'll add yellow like we did before, and look at this beautiful green. Still quite bright though. The ratios are different from here. So what can we do to shut it off a bit? We'll just add a bit of red, and this is my perylene red. So a bit of red, and look at what happens. It turns more olivey. Okay, let me bring it up here. See, a little more olive. Now let's bring a bit more red, and it slowly actually becomes more golden gray. Now let me try and mix a gray out of these three, and I honestly I'm not sure how. Sorry, got the French Ultramarine. I'm honestly not sure how gray it would go, because I'm not experienced yet with the manganese mixing with reds. I actually used it with a bit of magenta, which was really, really neat. But let's try and produce some kind of a gray. So this is a bit more towards the green, so we'll add a bit more of the red. So that's, I think that's as gray as it'll get. If we start adding more yellow, it will turn, see, warmer and greener. Blue won't help us here either, okay? Now, let's try doing the same with French Ultramarine, and you can go about it a different route. So you can first use the French Ultramarine, and then a bit of perylene red. So you get this nice little purple, and to that you can add the yellow, and turn it into a green gray. If this is gray, and this is purple, the gray will actually look like yellow, even though it's, or like a green, even though it's more of a gray, because it has less of the purple in it. So that it's a funny illusion kind of a thing. Now, you know what I like to do sometimes? To mix greens. Now I'm just going over some random stuff, and then I'll try and pull it together into a scene, okay? Just not a very complex scene without any reference even, but just showing you something very basic, okay? So the way I like to mix sometimes greens is, and you know it, let's use French Ultramarine for this. I like to put my green there, my blue, sorry, and then put my yellow right next to it. I love showing that variation. And what I find is that variation and letting it mix on paper, and it's one of my most successful videos to this day, I'm sure most of you have seen it. I find that this separation on paper adds a lot of grace to it, makes it look more interesting. And you can always come back with, let's say, a later wash and add some deeper shadows later on that are a little more muted, maybe, and a little more unified to hold this all together. Okay? Or you can do it wet and wet. So let me show you. I'll just mix something darker, first green, and then we'll mute it with some red, some more green just to darken, and we can establish the shadow while it is still wet. Like this, just a very basic pattern, and then cast it over to the side. So you get this kind of a tree or whatever. And I love this kind of a thing. It reminds me a bit of what Steve Mitchell does in Mind of Watercolor, a bit of a spontaneous landscape. So we'll take some shape, and then, so let's say we go a little more red here, and he'll pull out of it some details. Obviously he knows how to do it. I barely do this kind of an exercise, so I don't really know how to do it that well, but he'll start this kind of a landscape and build it outward. So that's really cool. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Now, remember what I said about how things are usually muted. So what you'll often see is something like along the lines of this. I'm going to mix a kind of neutral green here, okay? So something like this, not too bright, right? Something like that. Now let me show you. What you'll often see in nature is this kind of an outline that's fairly light. For example, if it's a tree or a bush or whatever it is, and then the actual thing is much more muted. So I'm kind of filling in the blanks here, and that's the actual color of the trees. Sometimes greens are a little hard to tell. Sometimes they're so bright that it's really hard to tell if they're a light green or a mid-value green. Sometimes you'll get a lot of mid-value greens, but the basic gist of it is this. Usually, again, the bright color will be perhaps around the edges. And I'll show you something really cool in a moment. And on the inside, it's actually going to be darker and more muted. That's the most important part. So you'll very rarely see a landscape, and we'll look at some of the artificial greens in just a moment. That's just this green. And it's a very common mistake to see this green. And I started with this green. And what I would do then initially, I'd be like, okay, that's too green. I'll add a bit of yellow to slightly mute it. And that was a great step forward. But what ends up happening is I find that I don't like to rely on pre-existing greens as the basis. I'll use them as a support color. I'll use them, I'll even use them for the brighter section, right? So this brighter section that's in the light, I'll use the bright green there. But I won't use it as a basis because it's so artificial and it sticks out a lot, and you see a lot of these things. Very few things in nature will be as green as this. What's going to be as green is cars, signs. You know, our highway signs are this color. So kind of, not exactly, but kind of a bit more muted, but still very artificial green. Now look at this kind of a piece of foliage. If I want to make this brighter, I'm just going to mix. Now we'll make the yellow look brighter. Okay, I want to show you how easy it can be. Hopefully I'll succeed. We'll see. So I'm mixing a bit of a darker mix that I'm going to be using for the background, right? Because let's imagine that there's a shadowy area behind that bush or whatever it is. And by carving out that shadowy area, we're also carving out the well-lit area, right? So, and that's what will often happen. You'll have a very thin, even thinner than what I did here, strip of maybe a bright yellow, and then the rest will be super muted. Okay, so the main takeaway from this, and I'm just scribbling, you know, it's not supposed to be anything too grand, but the main takeaway is try as much as possible to avoid the super bright colors all throughout the painting. It won't make sense, and it shouldn't be this way. Okay. Now we can try doing something else that's pretty cool and fun. So let's say there's this maybe a shadow underneath it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just showing you the concept of that's the bright color and the rest is very muted. Okay. Now I want to do something else. So let's flip this. Let's rip this off because I don't want it to touch the next page. Let's see here. Let's draw a frame, okay? And I'm just going to put some kind of a wash in it, okay? So we'll get something like this. I know it's hard to see the pencil. That's fine. And maybe we have this kind of horizon, and then there's a road that leads slowly towards us, right? Something like that. Very thin road, or maybe it's a river. We have painted these kinds of scenes before, right? I don't know if there's mountains, but here's the key part here. The green in the foreground will never be as bright as the green in the background, and that's a very, very common mistake. Okay, so we don't want to do that. What we want to do is first avoid that pre-made green. We can use it later. I'll show you how. But what you want to do is go again, as said in the chat, very blue or even gray, depending on the settings. Okay, and sometimes it'll be gray, sometimes it'll be blue, very bright blue too. Some scenes you'll see that it looks beautiful. And the closer we get, in theory, the kind of purer, cleaner, and a little less muted it's going to become, all the way till we get to what's really close, and then it's a little bit of a pure color. You can get a bit of these too. Let me show you a bit of these colors. But that's kind of the overall process we're going through. And I want to show you one more thing. In the background, and that's very important, the colors are more even and unified because we can't see as many details. Whereas in the foreground, you'll see the nuance of a yellow here, a green there, blue here. You see? So not only do you see more saturated colors in the foreground, you also see more different iterations of colors. So you should try, at least in the beginning, to go for a little bit of a more muted, let's say, thing for the background. Okay, so let me show you. We'll do something fun here. So I'm just grabbing a bit of a random paint from what I have on the palette, and that's going to be our sky, right? This is a bit of a simpler paper, right? It's not 100% cotton or anything like that, but that's fine. It's going to serve the purpose we need here, because we're going to do it in one go. And then we're going to grab this beautiful muted color using blue, yellow, and red. And don't forget that values also play a role. So you want to go maybe a little lighter, right? And we're going to paint this kind of area from both sides of this road. And we're going to keep the road a little lighter for now, okay? Road, water, whatever it is. So we're going to do this alla prima. Now look at what happens the closer we get. I'll start feeding this a bit of a maybe cleaner version of that blue, that manganese blue. Because generally speaking, just the colors are going to get a little brighter and a little more, I guess, more expressed. And then we start moving into the olives, right? Bit of an olivey green. And yes, it should gradually get darker too, but that's not as important here. And it's kind of an underpainting, right? And the closer it gets to us, now here we're going to start seeing more of the yellow, right? And what I like to do is once it gets really close, I also want to provide interest, and so we'll see multiple iterations of the color. So I'll start here already so that it doesn't feel like the road divides it into two completely different worlds. And I'll do like a bit of blue there, like this, just to give the viewers something to look at. A bit of kind of an individual blue, and then a bit of an individual yellow that will show through. And we'll keep this motif around here the same kind of way where it's closer to us, right? So, and don't forget that things can pop above the road. So maybe there's a bush here that's a little taller. Maybe there's a tree that I'm thinking how to cross it. Maybe like this. So there's a tree that crosses the whole thing, but we won't deal with the top of the tree for now. Maybe then there is a bit of a more French ultramarine green, right? And maybe then we have a bit more of, and then we can start using the pre-made green. So maybe a bit of this one, a bit of this May green. Maybe we can start putting in this very artificial one, because it will work because it's in the foreground, right? And you can do beautiful, simplified landscapes this way, just to practice. And you can practice negative shapes, painting around those shapes. You can practice all sorts of concepts just by doing that. And the goal isn't to produce something that looks really good, but the goal is rather to just practice that kind of overall color balance and color harmony. If we put it to the sun and for just a moment, it will dry. It's going to dry unevenly, but that's fine. That's actually the paper. It's the paper's fault. Now, sometimes what I'll do within those is I like to add a bit of red. So I'll just pop in a few flowers or whatever that is, a few reds. And again, the goal, it's not going to be something pretty necessarily, but look at that. At least there's an idea starting from muted and going all the way to more saturated and more individual colors. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's take a quick break, not from streaming, just look at the chat. Okay, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to drink some of my ACV. And hopefully you won't tell me that you couldn't see anything. But yeah, sorry about that. I know it's not the best quality. David, MC says hi. Thank you. Scar's message retracted. Sorry. David Dono, so you. Hi, Liron. I'm learning so much from you. Can you give me some advice on making spontaneous strokes on branches of a tree? I feel mine get very predictable and unnatural. Yeah, that's always a challenge. So I'll tell you two things. If you have a good plan, spontaneity isn't as important. So what I want you to do the next time is already at the drawing stage, think about what would be a good shape. So very often we go for too much of a robotic shape. So if you have a tree, you'll maybe follow this triangular shape to the T, and there's barely any variety to it. So you want to break that off a bit. Go a bit to the side here, go a bit to the side there, move the top a bit, do something to make it feel more organic. And that also applies to what the tree next to it looks like, trying to make that, to keep that variety. So if you have a good sketch to begin with, you don't have to rely as much on spontaneity, right? And if you just put in these triangles, that's fine. Some people can work with that. But if you feel like it's not enough for you, then put in some more details to help you figure it out. Now, to answer like more directly, what I would do is I'll really work the way I interact with the paper and the brush. So I won't paint the shapes the same way like this and try and get the variety from the shapes themselves I'm painting. I'll actually really modify how I interact with the paper like that. I'll use different angles of the brush on the paper. So I'll go like this, then I'll go like that, then I'll go like this, then I'll go like that, then I'll do a shape that's clearer, then you see what I mean? See what I'm getting at? Try and vary and it's mostly angle game. It's really mostly a game with the angle at which you touch the paper, okay? So you'll go kind of a dry texture, and then you can go a little more with the edge of the pen, of the brush, and then you can push against it like this, go like that. Try a variety of different angles and you will get it, okay? That's usually the thing that's responsible to it. Now I will give you, as a side note, try using a multitude of colors. It's not going to vary the shape, of course, but it is going to vary the concept, and that may be something you will enjoy, right? Oh, sorry, I wanted to leave that here. So that will be my take on your question. I hope that helps. Scar says, spell checker got me again. I hate spell checker. Oh, sorry about that. Sophia says, is it my laptop lagging or is it the stream? It's the stream. Sophia would have been such satisfying. Yeah, don't worry. I'll do another one. I'll do another one that is that's more that'll show it better. I may even do like a video version of this stream. Okay, I may do something like that, like just to create a video that is on the same topic. Even though I covered it before, it could be fun. Sorry, I had a feeling going into this it's going to be a bit of a problem, so my bad. Donna says hello. Kelvin says Ultramarine is biased towards red, so if you mix the green, it's going to be a muted green because of, which is perfect for foliage. Yeah, I like that too. It's very easy to produce a bright color. Sometimes it takes longer and it's harder to produce a muted color. So put a lot of emphasis on that if you can. Learn how to find the nuanced mixes, right? Let me show you the previous page too. Learn how to find and look, this got a nice little depth to it once it dries, I think. Once it dried, learn how to find these colors, and avoid these, right? These. It's too strong. You want to have them, but at the right ratio, which is like 10%. If you aim for realism, if you just want to use whatever color you want, like I often do, use whatever you want. And don't forget that watercolor dries lighter and more muted, so you have to account for that. There's actually a lot of skills that go into that. So don't feel like this is something super easy that you can't get right, because it's not easy. Hey Donna, thank you so much for being here. Kelvin, when I do spontaneous landscapes, all I get is either mud or nonsense. I'm just not very good when it comes to sea abstraction. So Kelvin, one tip I can give you, especially for mud, work larger. Because when you work smaller, all the paints kind of merge together and create that mud. If you work larger, they won't have enough room. So for example, if I do this, and I just grab a bunch of blue here, right? And then I'll just grab a bit of yellow here. This isn't going to turn into mud, right? They're too far apart. And even the next color that I'll put, maybe a bit of orangey kind of red in the background, or a brown kind of thing here, that won't get all the way to here, right? And be very careful with your wet and wet. So if you do a bit of wet and wet within those shapes, you know, stop early enough. You shouldn't get mud. To me, by the way, that's not the challenge with spontaneous landscapes. It is to me about the imagination. That's a little harder. I think my air conditioner just dropped a water drop into my bucket. Interesting. that hasn't happened for a year. Mark says, I'm late again. Don't forget to like everybody. Thank you so much, Mark. Better late than never. Indeed, Dave. Waro says, I'm seeing the stream in 1 frame per second. Yeah, sorry. We can pivot to talking. I think we've covered most of what I wanted in terms of technique. I'll show you a bit more, but yeah, the audio is fine though. Yeah. Petra says it's special time for computers too. Yeah. Calvin Zero. Today we're doing stop motion painting. Yeah, at least we're enjoying it. Well, I guess I'd rather stay like this than to have the video smooth and the audio distorted. Yeah, that's always the best problem. Looks like a big footprint on the left. This one, yeah, that's funny. I am with you. Thank you, Scars. Marigold Wood says, watching the video 1 frame at a time like this is actually quite helpful to me. Yeah, good. It's slowing down the process. That's great. Bigfoot is really wrong. Got him a prisoner. Liron, do you ever use Payne's Gray? I guess Payne's Gray and Lemon Yellow makes a nice landscape green wall. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna switch to my face. Maybe one less visual source like the table and my face will make it a little more bearable for now. So do I use what do you say? What colors were they? Chromium oxide green will change your life. It's so natural. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I haven't used it enough, but I like it. Scar says, so yeah, have you ever used Paint Gray and Lemon Yellow? So I don't like Lemon Yellow as much, but I think I should check it out. I should look into that. Payne's Gray, I had a bit of it and I used it in the past. I should use it more. I just have so much fun mixing my grays for my primary colors that I find that like the last color that I actually need on my palette is gray. But I guess it could be helpful in some instances. David, thank you for the advice. I'll try switching off my autopilot, mixing colors, angles, and bolder moves for spontaneity. Yeah, that'll help. So yeah, I'm thinking let me know if you have any other questions, because if the video is super laggy, I don't want it to be too heavy on the visual side. But let's look, let's do this. Let's look at some of my greens that are right here. Some of the pre-mixed greens. Just explore some of them and see what we can learn, or maybe what we may want to try in the future. So I have a bunch of them, and the one I did show you the most of, I think, is this kind of a May green. And unfortunately, I don't even remember the names of the rest of them. I have them written somewhere, and I can definitely check for you. But what I find that this is perfect for those really bright greens that are in the foreground, and I can actually use it almost thick to get that brightness. It works really well, and I know the light is a little in the way, so here goes. So that's actually a really useful one. So May green overall is one you may want to look into. Now, next up, we have a couple that are quite similar, to be honest with you, and some of them are very opaque. We have this one. That's just a hint different than the May green, you see. It is different though. Like that. It's hard for me to describe it. I mean, it's super visual, but it feels like it has maybe less yellow in it. That's what I would say. It's less yellowy. Now, next up, we have the last green is the one that's very good for dark detail. So if you're looking for a quick... Sometimes this is what I'll do. Let me show you. The first one is muted. This one is a little more muted, and it's a little harder of a pen, so it won't sometimes pre-wet as easily. You have to really dig into it. Now you see. So that looks a bit to me like the not exactly undersea green, but it's highly muted and it's darker. Now if we move to the last one, which is the one I just showed you, it's very artificial looking. But the advantage is that it's also very strong. This is more of a phthalo blue, a phthalo green, or maybe like an emerald green. I think it's a phthalo, if I'm being honest. It looks more like that. Now the advantage of phthalo, and this is, you taught me this trick, you the viewers, to mix it with yellow ochre, and then it looks really, really good, and it helps muting it. The advantage is also that it gets dark very easily, and you want for every painting to have one color that can do that. For the shadows, for the deepest shadows. To me, that's usually French Ultramarine, maybe with Perylene Red. But if it's very green based, you may not want to go too blue or too purple. So it's good to know that you have a paint that could be a good basis, perhaps, for a green. So you would start with the green, and then you can add to it, for example, in this one, it's going to be the Verona Gold. That's kind of ochre-y, right? So it mutes it down a bit, or we could just add a normal yellow here, and that way we can produce a very dark green very easily. Now if you want to mute that, you can just use red, right? Red will mute it very easily, and I bet you these two could produce an almost black color. So let's test it out. Oh, sorry, it's this one. Very soft, and then I'll add a bit of Perylene Red to it. Sorry, I'm getting the pens confused all the time, but you see this is like really, really dark. Now it is, if you take it up to the lighter version, and by the way, this is an exercise you want to do, just go like that, you will see it's more muted, right? And it's still a bit artificial, but not as much. but in its darkest form, it feels like a great kind of green to use for the shadows within trees or something like that. And that's going to be very easy to mix. So if you need a fast mix like that, it could be a good solution. I used to use a lot of Carbazole Violet by Daniel Smith for that kind of a thing. Let me see if I can pull up the tube here. Yeah, there we go. So Carbazole Violet is one of those colors that goes dark so easily that I would use it as a staple. I'd use my blue, yellow, and red, and then I'll always have my Carbazole Violet for the darker mixes. I'll put it with whatever, with the blue. It works really well with phthalo blue, by the way. In the blue, in the red, in the yellow, I'll put it in everything just to get it darker more easily, you know? So I think that's a good kind of thing to be aware of, right? So when we look at these greens, they can all fill different purposes. And to me, it's not as much about using each and every one of those in a given painting. To me, it's about learning them so that I know which one to use as a supplement to my primary palette. That's my approach, right? So, for example, this one, I know this one is more versatile. With this one, I can use and it works well with French Ultramarine, with Parylene Red, with different types of yellow. It works relatively well. I know I can use it whenever I need that bright green like you'd see in Paul Talbot Greaves's work. This one's a little more nuanced, so I'll have to figure out a use for that, right? And this is a great muted green if I just want to mute my mix, get it dark and mute at the same time. And this is just great for dark greens, but for example, this one, I know that I need a strong red to counteract it, to mute it, right? In fact, I'm curious to see, let's see if we can produce a gray out of this one by testing different reds, because that's another thing you want to be aware of. So if we have this green that has a lot of yellow in it, it's kind of phthalo again. What happens if we use Pyrrole Scarlet with it? Well, let's see if we can get it to mute a bit more, right? So it's still quite on the green side. So what we're missing is either more red or a different color. Let's see what we can get here. Right, so this turns into a very muted brown. So maybe we need more blue. Let's just play around with it a bit and see what we can produce. Because I wonder how I would go about muting this, right? So this goes into more of the gray realm. It's interesting. So if I were to take this and mix it with this orange, let's see what we'll get, right? Just curious. I want to see what will happen. See, we get this is actually a nice color. And you want to make these experiments and don't follow my minimal palette approach. That's not for everyone. You want to find what works best for you, and maybe you'll find, like, for example, a good example of this is Mark Foley, French watercolorist, one of the best in my opinion. And what he does is he has very unique color schemes. So sometimes it's more traditional and it looks a little more realistic, but sometimes he'll use strong blues and strong reds that work so well together. Kind of like a cerulean with a slightly muted Pyrrole Scarlet. So you'll get something like this and a beautiful cerulean that's a little lighter, that's more of an ultramarine, I guess. But yeah, something like, we'll just paint it this, right? So this kind of a combination like that. It works very interestingly together, but he's a master of knowing how to mute this one so that it works with this one. Mute this one so that it works with this one, you know. So yeah. So to kind of conclude what we did so far, now I'll go and see if you have some more questions. I want to encourage you to explore these in-betweens. And remember, not only blue and yellow, also add red. Red actually is a great tool for closer trees because very naturally, the closer we get to the thing we look at, the more red and yellow it has. So just putting a bit of red, funny enough, and maybe not as intuitively, will bring it forward, right? Even if the trees look like more green or even blue, putting that hint of red in it can go a really long way, right? And I'm sure you've seen paintings that are very, very much based only in yellow and blue, or just a pure green, and it's lacking something. And like here you see, this red actually plays an important role compositionally. If you didn't have that, to me it feels a little flat. Even if you look at the Velasquez palette that has burnt sienna, it's still a red, you know, it has that bit of orange to it. I find that this alone may be lacking. Even here, if you look at this one, you don't see any explicit red, but don't be mistaken, it's there in the mix. It is in the background, in the darkness of the background. It is present, and that really brings it something. The same is true for just using red and yellow, or just using maybe blue and red is the most forgiving for me personally, because it has warmth and coolness to it, a bit more in a more significant way. But still, I need all three personally. Again, don't do what I do. Just figure out what you enjoy and what works best for you. So now, did we just fold it? Here, yeah. Okay. And then we've been talking about depth, okay, and how you want to make sure that you capture depth not only with values, which is what I usually discuss. You also want to capture depth with temperature, with colors, okay, which is kind of the same. Temperature is just a specific combination of colors in the context of the paintings. For example, this red is as warm as this painting gets, right? This red or this yellow are very warm, but if we'll have a painting that looks like this, it turns these into very muted reds. So it's all in the context, right? In the context of this painting, this is quite strong of a warm temperature, right? But if you have this, then it makes this look very pale and cool in comparison. So temperature and color are very contextual, and you can make a color look very cool or very warm depending on the settings. And lastly, what I want you to do is, and we talked a bit about shapes, right? The shape does matter. You want to get your shapes to look good, to look interesting. If it's nature, you want them to be varied. Avoiding patterns, that's a big one, and I know a lot of people have trouble with it. What I would try and do to avoid patterns is just really throw my hand all around, even force myself to give up a bit of control of over the pencil, right? The counterpart to that is, if you feel like you do need that accuracy, like here, go for it, and maybe do like a large gesture line, and then work on slowly developing it into the more specific details, right? So have a combination of both, right? That's, I think, the best way to go about it, the more balanced way. Now, lastly, I want you to become more familiarized with your greens, the ones that are pre-mixed. I want you to try and use all the ones you have at your disposal. And you know me, my angle is not, I'm going to use all of them together and go crazy, which is possible. Maybe you should try that too. What I want to know is, what uses can I find for them in the context of the paints I love using the most, the combinations that I really enjoy, and learn how to find their role. This is why I do recommend starting more limited, because it's hard finding a role for everything, and what you end up with is a mess. Is a mess that's just a lot of greens. It doesn't have the sense of depth. It doesn't have the sense of light, three-dimensionality. You want to introduce these very gradually and slowly. Okay? Now let's look at some questions, and then I told you it's going to be a short one today, and then we'll maybe move towards wrapping it up. Actually, I didn't finish almost anything of what I was planning today, so I have a lot of work to do after this one. Let's see. Tarcisio says, hi, Liron, welcome back. Josephine says, is your air conditioner on the ceiling? Yes, it is. It is right above the table. So, yeah. Scars, let's see, 1 second. Yeah. Sometimes I want a lot of gray, so I use premixed gray for consistency. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially for large areas, you want to have something pre-mixed. That makes sense. Calvin says, one thing I learn about muted color is, if you paint with mostly muted color, for some odd reason, it'll make the painting look more realistic. Yep. That's exactly what we talked about. Yeah, it makes so much sense. The reason is that life and actual things are nuanced. The color are nuanced, the temperature is nuanced. It's not really strong of a color. It's usually for the more artificial things. And by the way, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. Just ignore the video. I see it now on my end. It's terrible. Let's see. Perlin green is great if you want a simpler shortcut to dark green. Yep. Perlin green, it's very muted too, if I'm not mistaken, right? That was my only problem with it. And it's funny that it's a black pigment, actually. It's a green-black color. But yeah. Crispy, hi, are you familiar with Diane Mise or Mise? No, I'm not. I'll check. I'll check her out. Let's search YouTube. Let's see if I'm familiar with, because sometimes I'm subscribed to channels I don't even remember. Just because I'm subscribed to every probably watercolor channel on YouTube. So let me check. So I'm unfamiliar with her work, but let's see if I'm subscribed and I forgot. That could be funny. If that's even her channel, I'm not sure. And my computer is super slow, so maybe I'll save the test for later. Yeah, that's not her channel. I'll look into her work after the stream. I'm curious to see it. It looked good from what I saw in the Google preview. Looks really interesting. Very muted too. Nancy G, thanks Liron, you have taught me so much. Yara Lucas, it's great to mix like this because you learn to make the right color that you want. Yep, that is true. Scars, I like Viridian. Oh yeah, Viridian is another good one. I use Aurelian Yellow. I never know how to pronounce it. Aureolian Yellow? Aureolin Yellow? Lemon Yellow or a bit of red to neutralize it. Sienna works well to darken and neutralize Viridian. Yeah. Loose V, do you notice a difference when you apply blue over yellow versus yellow over blue? Not the greatest. Not that big of a difference. The only thing that may happen is if there's a big difference in their transparency or opacity. If the yellow is very opaque, maybe you'll get a different effect if you let it dry and then put on top of it. But if you're talking like we did here with the letting the mix on paper, then no, I don't notice a difference. I use them very freely. And I'd much rather use them freely than overthink this particular thing because it will slow me down. Marigold, out of my window, everything, sky, trees, grass is bright because of the Italian sun. If I paint these colors, the result is flat. If I mute them, it looks like a dull English landscape. What can I do? So you want a combination, Marigold. I'll give you the best advice I can. Use muted for 90% of the painting and then have one or two spots that are very strikingly saturated and colorful and pure. That's how you usually get that effect. So you'll have maybe, and I know what you mean. I love Italy, and it's just a beautiful. You did say Italy, right? Italian sun. Yeah. I love that, and I know exactly what you mean. It still is mostly muted, and then some parts of it are stronger. That's one thing I would suggest you do. The second is try going. So here's an interesting suggestion. Try doing a first layer that is very saturated, like I do with my exaggerated colors, and then do another layer that is muted for the shadows. Have all the shadows muted, gray, blue, something like that, and see what happens. So we're kind of reversing it. Instead of going 90% muted, 10% saturated, you're gonna go 90% saturated yet light, and 10% muted for the shadow, or a larger percentage if there is more shadow, right? I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you give it a try, because it's a good question and I get what you mean. I'm curious to see if it'll help. We're really enjoying the slideshow. Design Your Talent says, hello, sir. Hey, welcome aboard. Lola, who was the French artist you mentioned? Yeah. I'll write it down. Mark Folly was the artist I mentioned. When I clean my palette with a paper, my paint mixes very oily and difficult to mix. How do you clean yours? When I clean my palette with a paper, my paint mixes very oily. Weird. I didn't have that. Yeah, the beading, there is a way to solve it. What you want to do is take a bit of a iron wool, you call it, like the kind of irony, stringy kind of wool that you scratch stuff with or clean stuff with, scrub them, and you just very gently scrub it. And when I say gently, like imagine you're just touching it, right? I'm just putting my finger and doing this. That's what you want to do on all the mixing areas, and it will solve it for you. It's a very quick fix. There's actually a good video on it on YouTube, but it's just a very quick fix. So I hope that helps. I hope my voice helps. Sorry about the video again. Tom, gotta love the YouTube, these YouTube reminders that don't actually alert you. Oh yeah, sorry Tom, and we're gonna wrap it up soon, so sorry that you got the notification now. And thank you Mark for writing Mark Foley's name. He's a genius. Marigold Wood, thanks. Like the sound of the bright underpainting. I presume you mean adding the shadows as glazes once it dries. Yes. I would even say experiment with two things. One, try and put some shadows wet in wet and follow what I just said of having them muted. And also try putting some shadows wet and having them dark but still warm and saturated, or still strong and saturated. Try both of these and see what works better for you. You may find you like one over the other. So do an initial wash. Yes, steel wool. That's right. Do an initial wash. While it's wet, put a strong shadow in a more muted color, and let it dry and add the final shadows. And then do the same, but do the wet with the same kind of saturated colors you've been using for the initial wash, right? So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's what I meant. And Jill, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for your support always. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I think we'll close shop for today. 1 hour for a live stream. That's one of the shortest ones we've had, but I feel okay about it because most of them have been super duper long so far. So yeah, like 2 hours is the standard I put for myself. I will make sure I'm not uploading any videos next time. That's a big load on the connection, especially uploading, because the upload speed, it's using the same resources to upload this live stream and do this live. So sorry about that. I hope you still got something out of it. I will keep the stream up, so sometimes it looks a little better maybe in the playback. Sometimes it may look worse. I don't know, but we'll see about that. And yeah, we'll improve things. I promise. It may take some time, but we will improve them. What else is interesting, I guess? This is almost the end of my biz week, so next week I'm going to put a lot of effort into art. I'm going to draw a lot. Hopefully we'll paint more, because the last art week I did more sketching and less painting. And yeah, so here's what I want you to do. If you have questions, just leave them as a comment maybe once this live stream ends. I'll be sure to check them out and answer whatever I can. And yeah, that's it. Take care. We'll talk to you again real soon. Hopefully next time it's going to be a bit of a better connection and we can do some more, let's say, detailed painting. But I really hope you enjoyed this one anyway. We'll talk again soon.